Okay, so this is going to be the first of the 4 videos for analyzing numerical data, just making sure that we're going to break it into each piece. So this first piece is basically the one where we're discussing some different ratios and how ratios can be used to solve things. Okay, so we have the tire problem, and if we recall, the first digit, or the first set of numbers, P just says passenger tire. The next one tells us the width of the tire, but we have to remember that that's in millimeters, and that's super important because we're going to have to change it to inches because this last digit, 16, is the height of the wheel, or the wheel diameter, and that's the metal, the rim. Maybe that's a better word for it. The rim diameter. And we can basically remember that this is talking about rubber, about the black part of the tire. And this is talking about the metal part of the tire. Okay, so we've got those. And then this 70 is the part that seems to throw more people because of the way you're writing it out to work, I think. But this means 70%. And what that is that's the ratio of height to width. Okay, and you can think of it like a rate. Well, it is a ratio. It's 70%. But what we also could think of is that that the height is that percent of the width. And since we know the width, so we should know how to find 70% of something, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But we give you this way because we want to show that it's a ratio, and most problems in life can be solved like a ratio or proportion, but we also could think about it's a percent of, and so we could think about it in that direction. Okay, so our first step is we have this width in millimeters, and we must convert them to inches. So our converting to inches, our converting anything is always the trickiest because we won't always look at it and we go, wait, am I multiplying? Am I dividing? I can't decide which to do. Well, if we will set it up as a proportion or even as a multiplication problem, it's much easier to do. And I see you guys setting it up as a proportion and treating it like multiplication. So I'm going to do it as multiplication. This is the way you do it in science. And so I think that might help to see it this way. So what we're going to say is we have 205 millimeters. And we're going to write our units because that's going to help us. And I'm going to multiply that. What can I multiply by that doesn't change anything? Well, the number 1. So I'm going to multiply by 1. But I'm going to multiply by a very specific one. I'm going to say 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. Because these two things are the same, it's a 1. And I can multiply by 1, nothing changes. Okay? I multiply straight across. 205 times 1 is 205. Divided by, we have an invisible 1 here if we want to put it, times 25.4 is 25.4. And watch what happens. Millimeters cancels with millimeters, and we're left with inches. So that helps us to make sure that we're always in our correct units. And that's what you saw in science. And I think that's where seeing it as a proportion has maybe made it a little bit more difficult for some of you if you remember it from science, okay? So you can do it like that. And we would get 8.071 inches. The more digits you leave, the more accurate your final answer is going to be. And we want to round as little as possible until we get to our final answer, because those digits help. You could even keep those numbers in your calculator and go back up and grab them so you have the full number, but the less we round, the better off we are. Okay? So I want you to pause and start and do this one and see if you come up with the same answer when you come back. Okay? So here I'm going to take 225 millimeters times 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. That gives me 225 over 25.4 inches because my millimeters cancel. I get to make that smaller. Sorry that you can't make yours smaller. And then we're going to type that in, and we've got 225 divided by 25.4 is 8.858 inches, okay? So there's, you got that one, okay? So I did this one for you. Hopefully you tried to do that one on your own. So now this aspect ratio, again, you can do it like a proportion, or you could think about, you got 70% of the test right. How many questions, okay? So height is what we're looking for. The height is 70%, which is 0.70, times the width, which is 8.071. And I'm going to go ahead and write the inches that I know my answer is going to be in. So I've got 0.7 times 8.071, 5.650 inches is my height. And remember, if we think about our wheel, I'm not great at drawing wheels, but we're going to try a little bit. That's this width. That is, 8.071 is the width, and the height is this part of the wheel. That is 5.650. Okay? Now, the height of the rim comes from, as we showed it right here, the height of the rim is 16. That comes straight from the tire, 16 inches. So now we want the whole diameter of the tire. This is the whole wheel. This is from the ground up to the top. Probably should write ground at the bottom. The ground up to the top, what is that height? Okay? So we're going to look at that and we're going to go, how far is it from the ground up to the top? Well, if we look at this again, we see we have 5.650. Then we see that we have 16, but what else do we have to get to the ground? We have some more of that tire. We have another 5.650. So we have 2 of these plus 1 of the rims gives us the entire height. And that would be, and we can now now it's a little bit better to round as we get closer to the very end. Okay, and we get 27.30 inches. That is my diameter. Okay. Last, circumference is pi times diameter. So we'll multiply that by pi. Ideally, you use the pi button. Don't type 3.14 because you're rounding. Every time you round, you get further away from the answer. So try not to round until you get to the answer, or round more digits than you need. So the circumference is 85.76 inches. It's not square inches because circumference is the distance around something. We go around it with inches. We don't cover it. Okay, that is our circumference. Again, we took the circumference is pi, and we hit the pi button, times 27.30. Okay, we do the same thing on the other one. I'm just going to write the answers on these. Okay, going to clear that out. 8.858 divided by 25.4 gives me, 8.858 times 75% is 6.644 inches, okay, because this one is 75%. Okay, my height of my rim is 16 inches. So my diameter is 2 of the tire plus 1 of the rim is approximately 29.288 inches times pi is approximately 92.01. We say approximate because we know pi is irrational. So we're not going to get an exact answer. We've been rounding all along, but we want to round as little as possible till we get there. Okay, so remember that that means that every time that wheel goes around, this wheel, is going to go about 7 inches further. Every time it goes around, 7 inches further, every single time. But if we're driving 20,000 miles, do we want to stop and calculate how many times it went around? No. So what we want to think about instead is something that if it's 7 inches and 7 inches and 7 inches, what we're really doing is we're figuring out within a multiplication. We're figuring out what percentage higher. And so that's what we want to know. We want to know how many times blank times as far, because that will allow us to compare it over and over and over again, where if we're going to look at this, and a lot of you are doing this, this is true, but then you have to say, okay, but wait, how far did we go, and how many of those 7 inches do I need, and I'm going to multiply them over and over and over again. Well, that's a lot of work. You can do it, but you got to go through a lot of work. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say 92.01 over 85.76. I want to get that ratio because that compares it and it tells us how many times as far, and then we can use that to be able to make all kinds of comparison. So it's 1.073 times as far. Thinking about percentages, the 1, if we multiplied by 1, it would stay exactly the same. If we put on the same tires, it would be a 1, just a 1. So this is the increase. And we think about percent as 1, 2 spaces. So in other words, it has a 7.3% error. That's the error in that is 7.3%. So if it says you went 20,000 miles, you know that you're going to go 7.3% more, or in other words, you're going to multiply by what you know it should be. It's going to be 1.073 times as far. So 20,000 times 1.073 is 21,460. And we always need to make sure we're using our units, because otherwise that could be inches and it could be just a centipede crawling around. Don't even have wheels. Okay, so that's how many miles they actually drove. Same thing with our speedometer. If you're going further in that hour, then we're going to multiply. So 70 times 1.073, because I'm going 1.073 times as far. So 70 times 1.073. In that hour, I went 75.11 miles per hour. It says to the nearest whole number. 75.11. Is that closer to 75 or 76? Yeah, it's closer to 75. So 75 miles per hour is the speed we would actually be going. So now notice these. We go from 225 at 70% to 215 at 70%, and with a 16-inch rim. So is the rim staying the same? Yes. Is the percentage staying the same? Yes. So all we're going to look at is here. I'm going from a larger tire to a smaller tire. If I go larger to smaller, do you think when I divide, I'm going to get 1 point something or 0 point something? Am I going to get more than 1 or less than 1? Well, over here, we got more than 1. We got more than 1 because the new tire was larger than the old tire. New divided by old gave us more than 1. So that means I was going more far. I was going 1 point something as far. And remember, 1 makes it stay the same. So bigger than 1 makes it go further, which must mean that less than 1 makes it go less distance. So if I were to take new 215 over 225. Now, can I just divide this? No, I would have to do all the math, but if these two numbers are the same, 70's the same, 16's the same, All I'm changing is the width, which changes the height. I'm not asking for the exact answer. I'm just asking if it's going to be a 1 point or a 0 point. Well, 1 point, I would have to get bigger tires. So I'm going to get 0 point, which is smaller tires. If it's smaller tires, I'm going to go less of a distance. I'm going to multiply by something smaller. So I am only going to be less likely, because I will be going less than 100% of the distance from the new old tire. Now, can you go ahead and figure out the whole thing? Absolutely. If you want to, you can. But what you need to remember is that if you're going smaller tires, you're going to go less of a distance. If you go less of a distance, then your speedometer is going to show a slower speed. You're going to go less speed than what your speedometer is showing. You're going to go part of that distance instead of all of that distance, okay? Can you, without doing math, figure out the exact numbers? No, because you got to do the percentage and you've got to add that. Can't find the exact numbers, but you can know that it's going to either be bigger than 100% or less than 100%. Okay, so that is tires.